Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity and the invitation. My name is Ziaad Suleman. I'm the Group Chief Commercial Officer of EOH. And I've been at EOH now for the last 2 years, primarily helping the company around the transformation, EOH 2.0, and the turnaround of the business. It's been quite a progressive journey. I'm sure all of you have probably seen in the news that we've certainly made some really good strides in terms of progressing the business, leading it back to growth, and really a delight to spend some time with you guys this morning. Over and above my role at EOH, I also serve as the chair of 4IR for South Africa at BRICS, and also sit on 2 presidential commissions. The one is around the digital economy for PPGI, which is public-private growth, and then the next one around the Collective X, which primarily is around skills. So today is really, I think, a really good discussion, and we need to think about, the advent of the world of 4IR, where it currently leads, what the key pivots in 4IR are, and ultimately what are the ups and what are the downs, right? And as we traverse the different aspects of this particular discussion around AI, I'm hoping that I can leave you with a bit more information and understanding around how we utilize it in order to advance benefit for society and businesses. So often, when you speak to people, there's often this misconception of the dangers of AI. And it's like anything else. And the reason why I use the depiction of this particular piece of track is because it's like anything else, right? I was doing a talk yesterday, and I was using the analogy of, driving a Ferrari. You can drive a Ferrari on a racetrack at 250, 300 kilometers an hour, and you'll be fine because you're using it in a responsible manner. Whereas if you drove exactly the same car at the same speed in an urban area, there are no doubt a multitude of dangers and ultimately negative consequences. And like anything else in the world of the 4th Industrial Revolution, how we utilize technology lay in the hands of the users and the people and the leaders. And this is very important. So we can either race towards danger, or otherwise we could utilize it in a productive manner that actually benefits people. So as we think about this, many different people have raised concerns around, AI, the pitfalls of it. In fact, one of the founders of AI, a person by the name of Jeffrey Hinton, actually resigned from Google at some point in time because he felt that there were too many risks relating to AI and the direction that it was taking. However, what is also important to know is that you could lead with great benefit, but it could also be a tool for great misinformation because of the multitude of different sources of data, what we have. And therefore, it is important for us to make sure that the generative AI products that come through are utilized in the right manner. This therefore means that as we think about how we utilize the artificial intelligence, the intelligence, the sources of different data, we have to balance the benefits and we have to balance the risks. Now, what this means is really that we need to make sure that we collaborate in ways that ultimately control the technology. So we have to take the benefit of the reward. We have to take the benefit of the reward and make sure that we control the risk. And as we do that, as we do that, we therefore have to maximize how we deal with it in a controlled manner. We need to make sure that ultimately the risks are minimized and they're mitigated, but the benefits are increased. And as I move further along my talk, you'll see that the undoubted benefits of AI are tremendous across multitude of industries and sectors. So a good starting point as we think about, what actually AI is important to think about the different terms that are often used in AI. And these are often confusing terms, but in essence, AI is simply a learning of technology traits using data as its source. And if we break this down, it's basically navigating the entire universe of data using technology to be able to go into that and understand it, and then work it out in a manner that becomes digestible to human beings. So whilst there might be different terminologies used when we talk about AI, it's really centered around the human brain. And and I'm sure many of you will know that part of our human brain, we often talk about a neural network. And in the technology sphere around AI, it's really talking about an artificial neural network, which is often referred to as ANN. And in this ANN, this is divided into multiple layers, with each layer performing a number of different tasks. Now, there is a difference between the different terms of AI, machine learning, deep learning, and so forth. But the way I want you to think about it is really AI being an umbrella term for computer science in data and analytics. And as we move forward on this, it's really around using the hardware and the software of technology to obtain, that is acquire, and therefore apply that knowledge, how the data works, and how we get it to think and behave to support and benefit human beings. In essence, what it does is that as it digests this multitude of information, which is absolutely massive, if we think about the many sources of data, it's then breaking it down in a way that can help us as human beings plan, problem solve, and ultimately make sure that we get better reasoning as we make decisions. So there is no doubt a generational shift in AI. When we look at the third industrial revolution, which took approximately 20 years to grow based on the capability of the internet, and now we look at the world of 4IR, it is vastly different. And what's changing in the world of technology is really the speed at which we are improving and the amounts of data that are coming in. If we just take a simple example of, how technology has really taken over the world since COVID, it is important for us to then realize that when we were in this time of COVID, many of us could not get to the office. We had to sit in our offices at home or in our lounges and ultimately plug back into the company data sets in order to do our work. Now, what that meant is that we needed the world of technology in order for us to be optimal and in order to benefit not only our work, but also to make sure that the economy moves. So this generational shift in AI is not only in AI, but it's generally a generational shift of technology. And when we think about this, it's very important to think about it in the context of, for example, moving from a desktop application and now using mobile devices. In the past, we used to go to a bank in order to do a transaction. And then we started using our laptops. And now we can do everything on the run wherever you are. So mobile devices have become part of this technological revolution. And this generational shift in AI is really powered by large language models, which generates text and other media through prompts. And therefore, the accuracy of generative AI will only improve as we continue to tap, responsibly into the growing data sets. If we take another example, for example, ChatGPT is another example of generative AI. And here we've seen, a huge splurge now in the market of where people are talking to technology in order to utilize the data sets to get an outcome. So if we had to ask ChatGPT as an example to write us a poem on, cricket as an example, it would write us a particular phrase, and then we could even adapt that. We could say, can you make the language softer? Can you make the language more poetic? Can we then, put it into sort of Shakespearean language? All of those things are ultimately ways of generative AI where the technology goes through multiple data sets, is able to take an analysis of that by understanding what the human wants and therefore producing an outcome. The most important thing, though, is that it is not the technology that makes the final decision. And this is where responsible leadership and ultimately where we as leaders have to show up, because we have to make those final decisions. All this is doing is really giving us an optimal view without spending tons of time to get to the same position. And when we get to that position, it is up to us to understand, to digest, and to place the context into what the outcome should be, and therefore make sure that we make the right decisions. So at the heart of the fourth industrial revolution, there are a multitude of different types of technologies. The world of 4IR is not about one particular thing. It's not about artificial intelligence. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, it's really around the convergence of a number of different technologies. And those technologies include things like cloud technologies, because as the data sets become more and more, we have to make sure that we have a place that can actually store and that we can pull from all of these large amounts of data. It's things about data and AI. It's about security. It's about robotics. It's about automation. It's about IoT sensors and so many other different aspects. But at the heart of all of this is data and AI and cloud, right? Because your data is becoming more and more voluminous. If you just think about all the different sources of data that we work with, whether it be a source coming from your mobile phone, your email, your social media platforms, IoT sensors, and so many other areas, they're all starting to come into an area where we as the human being have to digest that. And the only way that we can actually digest that is through an analysis of the detail of that data. Now, how do we do that? Because we have a day job, we have families, we have all of these things. What we need is we need some level of artificial intelligence, but applying it in a manner that's actually useful. And this is where the benefit of AI comes in order for us to digest and segment the data into what we actually want. There's no point in asking artificial intelligence to write us a poem on cricket, and then what it actually does is it gives us, a narrative on schooling. It's a total mismatch, right? So therefore, we are becoming very dependent on the technology to create more efficiency within our lives, within our business processes, and so forth. So it is important for us to then rely on the data, on the machine learning, on the AI sets in order to make sure. But as this all increases, so does the question of how we ever going to keep up. And that's where the entire notion of quantum computing comes in. And quantum computing is simply a mass processing power of machines that ultimately is able to work with large data sets, right? So if you think about it, it's really like an engine. An engine, if you buy a 1400 car, it gives you a certain output. If you buy a 2-liter car, it gives you a bigger output. If you go and buy a supercar, it gives you much more. And this really is a supercomputer which is able to perform at the speed that we need, because human beings want everything instantaneously, and we want things to be in the right fashion and manner and tone. And therefore, the supercomputer is able to digest and analyze all those data sets across multiple systems to give us what we're looking for. So therefore, the performance of the computing technology has to keep up with the convergence of multiple pieces of technology coming together. And this is extremely important in order for us to make sure that we remain efficient. Now, ultimately, I get asked many, many times about machines taking over and machines displacing jobs and all of those types of things. And the reality is that there is an element of where you have optimization within the business. There is no doubt that certain skills bases need to change. It does mean that certain people need to change the type of jobs that they're doing. But this means that we as humans and as leaders have to be very, very responsible. So as we see our environment changing, in order to save the jobs, we need to take the people and skill them up or reskill them or put them in a different domain, but ultimately make sure that we utilize the technology where man and machine are working together. And as we make automation a lot more intelligent, we therefore need to ensure that the production lines, etc., are in fact giving us the benefit of what we're looking for. So this is the important thing. AI really brings in substantial disruption, which impacts all the different types of industries. It impacts the entire systems of production, management, governance, all of those types of things are certainly looked at in an absolutely different way. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that we use this fourth industrial revolution, which gives us far more output than the third industrial revolution. We need to use it in a way that actually gives us the output, which is a lot more automated, a lot more intelligent, and ultimately making sure that we are able to predict multiple things. So, for example, where I talk about intelligent machines analyzing information and extracting insights, a simple example for you is if you're running a pipeline and you have IoT sensors, the IoT sensors will then be able to tell you that there's a loss of pressure, there's a leak at a particular point, or there's going to be a deficiency coming up soon, or that there's a need for predictive maintenance. These are all types of applications that these machines could do, and this really brings the intelligence of technology and machines to benefit human beings. Because an engineer that's sitting at the back of his desk that knows that there's going to be a failure is therefore able to be proactive rather than reactive. So how do we create a better business environment as a result of this? And really, what the AI does is it provides us with an opportunity in order to transform our vocations and increase productivity. It also allows for a shift in the workplace in order for us to enhance our efficiency and make sure that we as human beings work very closely with machines in order to drive a better outcome. Eventually, what we have is we have an enhancement of automation, we have an enhancement of productivity. Our supply chains and our economic growth should therefore be multifold. And, if we look at the research that's been coming out, whether it be IDC or McKinsey or PwC, they're all showing a greater growth rate as a result of technology. Not simply because the economies are changing, but simply because we can drive better outcomes that are more predictable in a shorter period of time. But that also means that the point that I made earlier about, reskilling and upskilling of people to get them to be beneficial within the economy and the fiscus is very important. Now, as we drive this, we will find that routine tasks, things like when you phone to ask for an order, it could be automated. So that could be a very simple menial task that, it doesn't really need a person, but ultimately drives economic activity because, the person that's ordering saves time, the people that are supplying save time, it goes straight away into the supply chain, and then therefore it gets processed. So very, very simple ways of actually driving this. Okay, so boosting productivity, again, we started talking about this. I think the important thing here we'll see is, the AI sophistication continuing and the menial tasks becoming lower. The key thing is that as you boost productivity, we need to make sure that we develop our economies so that the market is receptive for what we're doing. There's no point in having an offshoot of less employment, whereas machines are sitting stable, right? They're not actually doing anything. So therefore, this is part of where human beings have to certainly add value by understanding the market, how much of productivity is required, how much of technology needs to be infused, how quickly does it need to work, and those are all the types of things that we as humans control. But it's about balancing it. So you'll remember right at the beginning, I spoke about, balancing risk and benefit. This is a perfect example of where if you're running a manufacturing plant, you need to understand the market demand is X. If I use automation and if I smarten up my entire manufacturing plant, it will give me a lot more production. But is my market receptive to that? Or do I need diversification? And if I need diversification, then how do I think differently in order to benefit not only my local market, but also the international market? Now, this is the benefit of technology, of how it allows us to scale, but it requires that human mindset and application and context in order to derive the best outcomes. Unlocking the potential is particularly important, right? Because it's really around now saying, well, we have all this technology. We don't know where it's going to start. We don't know where it's going to stop, because the world of the fourth industrial revolution is here. And, the first industrial revolution took us 100 years to get to it. The second one took us 80 years. The third industrial revolution took us 20 years. And now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, but we're already starting to talk about the fifth industrial revolution, which is premised on data in terms of variety, volume, and velocity. Now, as we think about, okay, so if it's getting more sophisticated, becoming far more, intertwined within humanity, society, business, and into our own individual lives, then how do we actually get this benefit individually, but also for our businesses? And as we think about this, it's important to think about AI in the form of it being important and accessible to all sectors of society, because we cannot be exclusive as we advance our economies. We cannot leave behind a whole lot of people. Therefore, inclusivity is absolutely fundamental. And the way you get inclusivity is by making it applicable to many people, making it reachable by many people, and ultimately making it affordable by many people. And the only way to do that is by opening it up and therefore skilling people so that they can, intersect with the technology, and also breaking down those barriers, right? And I know it's easy to talk about these things. It's a lot more difficult in execution, but in reality is that we have to start. I mean, the alternative to us doing this means that we get totally left behind, not only in our own country, but in the world, and that we cannot allow. So the potential for business, includes multiple different things, including marketing, healthcare, financial services, education, professional services, and so forth. Many, many routine transactions which are just done over and over, tedious, same questions, all of those types of things. Why repeat something that can be automated, right? We're doing the same thing over and over, we can automate it. And if you can automate it, you get a lot more productivity, you get a lot more creativity, and ultimately, therefore, we make sure that people are deriving benefit through the efficiency. In fact, in the retail area, things like automating customer service agents, making sure that you have shopping advisors, things like recommending certain types of products because it pulls up a summary as you compare. These are all things that we do anyway, right? And these are simply examples of how businesses are benefiting through data and AI sets that are simply at the fingertips of the consumer. And then in the banking industry, as they continue to traverse more and more sophistication because of the data sets, it allows things like threat intelligence, it preventing fraud, making sure that people, regardless of where they are, provided they have a connectivity, are able to operate in the industrial sector, not only efficiency, but also mitigating uncertainties, and then solving complex problems, because you're able to take multiple different things, put them into algorithms and see what the opportunities are as it brings these options and solutions forward, right? The other things that are pretty important here as we think about industrial, is AI actually helps us speed up decision making, reducing errors, and ultimately solving in a much better way. I wanted to use an example here of, for example, an area around weather. So if you just take, for example, the banking sector. In the banking sector, if we had a simple thing like a farmer wanting a loan and going to a bank manager and asking for, let's call it R1 million, because he'd like to plant a crop of maize, and therefore he thinks that in a couple of months' time his yield will be X. The bank manager traditionally would simply sit there, and what would they do? They'd either have a relationship, they'd have trust, they'd look at the balance sheet, they'd look at the assets and liabilities, they'd look at, the credit record of the individual. Whereas now, with the advent of AI, what we have is a lot more intelligence, right? So at the fingertip, we'll know the credit record, which will take less than a minute. We'll know the history of the individual, even all the things that they don't disclose. We'll be able to know what the weather patterns in that particular area are over the next couple of months, and therefore we can almost certainly predict how good the yield of maize is going to be. We are going to also be able to have a much better understanding of the economic environment and how it's going to be trending. So now the decision-making of the bank manager sitting in his chair with all these data sets through the use of data sets and AI is able to make a far more informed decision. And this is part of the benefits of how we actually find that AI and data and technology is revolutionizing the way we actually operating in business. So the advantages for business in terms of retail offerings, it's really so many that one can just talk and talk and talk, But the reality is that you can simply do easy things like push marketing, right? Of where somebody is looking for, say, a particular type of product, then you're able to simply see that, you're able to then respond to them, you're able to give them the ups and downs. It's all of those types of things. If you're in a call center in retail, as an example, you're able to get the sentiment of the individuals through things like voice layered analytics. So you know whether a customer is phoning and whether they're calm or whether they're actually quite cross, right? And then how to deal with them. And then also when it reaches a point, how to easily escalate those calls in order to make sure that you look after the customer and that the customer centricity is good. Now, in our business, we look after a multitude of different types of solutions. And in this, whether it be across the financial services industry or the retail or mining or manufacturing, telcos, etc., we're finding that a lot of these types of applications traverse across many, many different types of industries. So the call center optimization opportunity can be used in multiple different industries. Similarly, you can even do things, for example, moving cash, right? Of where you have these cash in transit vehicles that are moving cash from point A to point B. You can do voice layered analytics with the driver because the bot is able to talk to the driver to understand exactly what his feeling is, whether he's feeling anxious, whether he's following a different route, or any of those types of things. And as a result of that, you're able to deploy your resources and to do backup, etc., based on these types of things. What this therefore gives you as a business benefit is really a much greater loyalty from your customer. And that's what the world of business is today. Everybody's chasing the customer, is trying to get more out of the customer, is trying to make sure that they have brand loyalty. And therefore, the service orientation of how we show up is very important. You cannot have an archaic bank that still expects you to come into the branch and expect there to be loyalty. It's not going to happen. Therefore, banks and financial institutions have to show up in a certain way. Retailers have to show up in a certain way. And all of these things are demanded by us as customers, and therefore the use of technology to satisfy us, but also make our lives more efficient, but to de-risk their business is absolutely important. And I think these are some of the things that we need to think about. Additional benefits across financial services, retail, as well as various other industries are things like, how do you automate invoicing, right? How do you open up an accounting system and make sure that there's no duplication? How do you utilize technology that basically does everything from entry to exit in a supply chain? So, for example, if I'm running a manufacturing plant and I know that I need 100 liters of acid in order to manufacture something, as soon as my acid level hits, call it 30, automatically I can place my next order for the next acid batch that I need. And similarly with many other products. In a bank, exactly the same thing, right? If somebody wants to open up an account, there's no need for an interference by an agent that's going to manually put in the wrong ID number. We can get the customer to do a lot of that work, but then it's a predictive process that gives the customer the output. And with the information that's provided, we're able to utilize AI in the background in order to verify everything, in order to make sure there's no fraud, in order to make sure that there's a level of intelligence that ultimately drives an output. And as we think about disrupting financial services, there is no doubt that digitization will continue to drive the outputs. We're seeing more and more fintechs starting to refine their product sets, develop new alternative opportunities across the globe, providing financial advice in a manner that is well thought through, and that when you pitch up to a customer, you actually take the right information first time so that you provide a good experience and it's efficient for the customer. And a lot of these things are as a result of AI driving the outputs. On the new accounting services, I just want to check how I'm doing for time. Sorry, can I just check? Okay, cool. Thanks. So I'll just run through these things quickly. I mean, there's no doubt that even in accounting, there's multiple benefits. So, for example, automating processes, balance sheets, reducing fraud and errors, increasing efficiency, etc. All of these things are the benefits of AI. And safety and efficiency, right? I mean, ultimately, the fourth industrial revolution technologies are traversing multiple industries, as we spoke about, but they're also benefiting the mining industry. There's an ability to understand what's the best way to go down into the ground, where you can actually predict the amount of gold in a particular rock, how to extract it, how to then, manually, a manual intervention can be converted into a digital intervention of saying, at this location, this is what we found. It's automatically uplifted. You can get the supplies coming down rather than somebody going all the way up. I mean, these are all the types of ways that the world is transforming as a result of digital transformation. So, I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of material. There's a lot that I can speak about on these types of things. But I think today, this simply gives you a great opportunity to really start playing with technology, utilizing it in a manner that does drive better business outputs. But the most important message that I want to leave with you is that man and machine has got to work together. Let's be responsible around how we work with the technology. Let's upskill our people and make sure that we leave a better place for tomorrow. So I'm going to stop there because ultimately I think we can go on and on, but I think it gives a good feel for the type of aspects that need to be thought about.
Kobus Herbst says there's a rapid development of open source LLMs based on Meta's Llama model and weights, without the safeguards that large companies like Google, OpenAI, or Microsoft may offer. What are the risks posed by these developments?
So, it's an excellent question, right? I think the risks are the application of how we utilize the outputs. And I think that's where we were talking about the responsibility of people. So I think as we find these different companies coming up with all of these fancy different application technologies, we still as the human beings need to make the decision. So for example, if we know that the certain output derives a negative solution, then I think it's up to us to have a certain level of values. And it's a pity that we ran a little bit out of time, because one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit later is AI and bias. And the bias of how we actually derive these models takes us in certain directions. If we don't have, the right responsibilities, governance, rules around how AI is written and what the algorithms are, then no doubt we're going to get the wrong interpretation, we're going to get the wrong output, which is then going to take us in the wrong direction, right? So therefore, I think, as we have Google and all these other companies coming out with these things, we have to then channel the positive through the data to get the output, look at the different options, and therefore make the responsible business decisions.